Hello, I'm Alex McDaniel,
And I'm Logan Loya.
and welcome to Terror Talks.
So today we have a special guest.
Hello, my name's Zach Finlayson, and coming in to help with the podcast today.
So basically what we do for this podcast is we just talk about our favorite horror movies and then just branch off and just talk a lot about horror.
Okay.
So, Zach, what would you say your top 3 horror films are?
Ooh, number one has to be The House That Jack Built. It's just such an interesting look. It calls back to Dante's Inferno so much. It's just a beautiful B horror movie that's just surreal, and it's just everything I want to see in a horror movie.
Yeah, and it's definitely more psychological horror.
Absolutely.
I haven't even heard of that movie. to
You
be
haven't?
hon- No.
It's really good. It's about this guy who I think has a mental disability.
He has OCD. He has he has so many different disorders that just kind of all culminate. He explains it like he is driven to kill. So the whole point of the story is it's like a anthropology about this guy's killings, Jack's killings, and it goes through all of his life and it just documents all these different instances that not even all of them are killings. There's just 5 different instances in his life that he did something terrible. I think a great analogy that's given throughout the movie that's like reiterated a few times is it's like a man that walks between light posts. He feels when he moves forward, his shadow becomes diluted and it becomes larger but not as dark. But right when he goes under the light post, that murderous instinct he feels just condenses and he feels driven to kill someone. He needs to kill someone.
That sounds interesting.
There's like a really good scene, which is probably my favorite, where he knocks on this woman's door and like baffles his lines trying to get into the house. And it's such a long and drawn out scene. And then once he finally gets in, somehow he murders the woman and like he fails the first like attempt.
Mm-hmm.
So he just starts breaking down and feels bad, and then once he finishes her off, he sneaks out of the house, gets in his van after he like cleans up everything. But because of his OCD, he keeps going back in the house and like checking things, and like it goes on for a while.
Going back to like her murder, I think the most insane thing about it is, so first time he tries to choke her to death, right? But this was one of his first killings. It's when he was inexperienced. He didn't know how to kill someone. So what ends up happening is he doesn't choke her for long enough and she survives. And then he nurses her back to not like health, but to not being on the brink of death again, just so he can stab her again. Because he doesn't feel sympathy. He feigns sympathy and he seems like he's sorry, but he's not sorry for her when he tries to help her. What he is he's mad at himself for not having gotten it right the first time. He feels like the OCD overwhelming him because he failed and he wants to try again and he wants to be better.
That sounds very interesting.
It's a really good movie. And then like with psychological horror movies, one that I always love is Hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good movie, and it's so well acted, and it's just a really good story. Because I know you've recently watched it,
I've
Zach.
watched it recently. That one always gets me because I have a little sister, and in case anybody hasn't watched it, there's a scene where the little sister dies because of something foolish that the older brother did. I don't know. Do you want to go more into that scene? I feel like you could explain it better than I could.
So the little girl, okay, so the older brother wants to go to a party, and the mother is just like, you have to take your sister if you want to go, and he was like, oh, fine. And so his little sister has a nut allergy, and there was a cake there with nuts in it, and she ate some of it. I think somebody offered it to her.
Yeah. Her brother pushed her to go get some cake because he wanted to go get high with his friends, while
Yeah.
he could leave his little sister behind.
And so like the scene where like she eats it and then her brother is freaking out, so they get in the car and they start driving back home, and the little girl cannot breathe, so she sticks her head out of the window trying to breathe, and here comes an electrical post, and
Yeah, it just takes her head off.
It-
It's a brutal scene.
and how he reacts afterwards, he's just completely, he's still high and he's just broken, and then like he just parks the car in the driveway and goes into his house and just goes to bed.
Yeah, parks the car with the child's
Yeah, the little
decapitated
girl,
corpse on it.
yeah, the head is still on the road, so he just left everything like it was, parked, and went to bed.
The thing that's so crazy about that is like you don't see what happens in between, or at least if I'm being honest, I haven't finished the movie. I don't think you see the part between him getting home and like being dejected and going to bed, and then it just jumps straight into the family.
It jumps straight to that next morning with
It jumps to like a month later, I think, like after they are in the grieving process.
no,
You do see the mother's
Yeah,
reaction.
you see you don't see it, but you hear it.
Yeah, you hear it.
Because like you're at the point of view of the brother just laying in bed, wide-eyed, and then you hear the mother go outside and discover it, and it's so so
terrible.
bad.
But there is like some scene, or you do have a time jump in it. I know there is
Yeah.
a time jump. I think it's right after that scene.
Yeah, I think it's after that where it's like about a month, and like
Oh, it is scarring.
it's so good. Have you ever seen it, Alex?
I have. It's been a while since I watched it though, so I need to rewatch it because I haven't watched it in forever. I don't remember when I watched it.
And then the same people who made Hereditary made Midsommar, which is I really liked Midsommar, but because they were both made by the same guy. And I definitely like Hereditary more, but Midsommar was still pretty good to me.
I don't know how to feel about Midsommar. It's just kind of like, I think it has really good ideas, but the pace feels off. The pacing feels weird, and I think that's what I didn't like about it. It like jumps between things so quickly, and it doesn't spend long enough on something that it should be spending time on. Like, just her whole rise to being a queen, like that at the end of the movie, you know, it just didn't feel paced right. It felt weird and it felt really sudden, which I guess could be the point of it, but I don't think it was done as well as it could have.
And then I love some of like the kind of Easter eggs in that movie where like cuz like her family dies at the beginning, and which is so messed up with her boyfriend in that movie, because like he wants to break up with her but her family just died. So he was like, ah man, now I can't break up with her. And it's so bad. But then like always in the background you see kind of like, I remember one scene where in the trees in the background you can see her like sister's head from her dead body, and it's really cool. It's really interesting.
Towards the end of the movie, doesn't the boyfriend end up cheating on her? And that's what
Yeah.
starts like the end sequence?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that was a crazy end sequence.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. Moving on to my second favorite movie. It is a classic, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I love it. A lot of people hate it. I love just the feeling it gives me. I remember when I was 7, I used to watch that every night before I went to bed. That's how much I loved Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I think it was like the practical effects, like the costuming was so good, and it looked so cool. Just the way it like contrasted like the silly like the idea of killer clowns coming from outer space, but it's like actually scary body horror. I think is a really cool contrast.
The thing that like is most scary, I think, from that movie is the laughs of the clowns. They have such creepy laughs.
I don't know, I think all clown laughs are kind of creepy though. That's the thing with them. But I do love Killer Clowns from Outer Space, especially for its time. You're talking about all that stuff. For its time, the costumes and stuff is really, really good. Like 1980s, you're not expecting all that, and they do it very well in there.
They just did, and back then they did body horror so much better because it's not special effects; it's all practical effects. It's like how like The Thing used bubble gum in it.
Yeah, The Thing is such a good one because like I love practical effects. Practical effects are what makes a horror movie good, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because like I wish more practical effects were used now than they do.
Yeah, they're doing more CGI and stuff like that because it's easier for them than trying to make stuff.
It's a shame because it's like when you have practical effects, it's like if you've ever done any like writing or anything, there's like an idea called constricted writing, right? So you constrict yourself in how you're able to do things. Like you aren't able to use ease in any of your words, right? So that makes you have to write in a way you never normally would. And that's what practical effects does. It constricts how you can make movies. You can't do these giant sequences that you thought of, like Thanos battling a million aliens. Like you just can't do that. You have to come up with new ideas. And I think that's what's so good about old practical effects is they made you think creatively and have creative monsters.
And then I think it sets the right tone, like for the actors on set, is that because you can actually see what you're scared of or what you're trying to hide from, and it makes it. I feel like it gives the actors like the right amount of like dread because some practical effects are actually terrifying.
Every time I think of that, I think reminds me of the It Chapter 2 at the end scene when Pennywise is chasing him around that big thing. How when you see the behind the scenes of it, it's a Pennywise mask on a big pole running around in circles chasing them.
Because like with the Hulk, like in the new Marvel films, it's just a guy on stilts holding foam Hulk fists with a foam Hulk head like not 10 feet, like 5 feet above his head.
I feel, it probably wasn't even fair to mention Marvel. They do so much CGI. It is practically entirely CGI.
Yeah, they run on treadmills too. Like that's the best part. Like instead of actually running, you go on a treadmill.
It's just insane.
That's another thing I like about horror is like with Marvel, you have these big giant just CGI fighting, but with horror, it's smaller. I don't like huge, big, like fights because it's just kind of boring.
I think sometimes they can be nice.
Yeah, sometimes they do it well.
But like, I also really like fights in horror movies when you have like your main character fighting the killer because then you actually see them wrestling around and stuff, and it's not just it's not a guy on stilts with the Hulk head fighting some invisible monster or something, you know. It's them like actually going at it and wrestling around and fighting and stuff like that. That's one thing I do like more about horror.
And then another thing with horror is like you feel like not for like every single horror film, but a lot of times you feel like it can actually happen. I mean, you know, not like some guy in an iron suit fighting a purple alien. That can never happen.
What do you mean? That's one thing I do really love about horror. It's you'd be challenged to try and find somebody that will argue that CGI is better than practical effects. Almost every horror aficionado will be like, yeah, practical effects is just better. You're just gonna have a more interesting watch because it looks real. Because it's just really, really hard to make something that looks real in CGI.
Yeah. And then like 2007 is like when they like hugely used CGI blood, and it just CGI blood does not
It
look good
ruins it.
at all.
It
And
looks
then
so bad.
especially in like 2000, like the main movie I think of is like Sweeney Todd, because like they use they don't use a lot of CGI blood, but they use it at some, and it's too red. It's way too red.
I feel like blood is that one thing that they can never get right. Like rarely they can get it right, because either it's too red, it's too thick, or it's too thin or something. Like it's so difficult for them to get it right. I've barely ever seen it done right.
From like a technical standpoint, it's just so hard to do like liquids inside of something like I don't know if you've ever worked with Blender or anything like that, but it's like a 3D modeling software. Blood is so hard to do. Liquid is so hard to do. It just never looks right. Because you gotta think about like how small the little like particles of water is. You're never gonna get it to look the same in CGI, and that's why I love practical effects so much.
And then like you have some of the greatest horror movies, and it's always practical effects. I don't think there's any like huge horror film that uses CGI. And then like some of the other films that use practical effects that I love, like you have The Thing, where it's great for they use for the creature and everything. And then I think the recently practical effect movie I've seen was Terrifier 3, because they used some pretty good practical effects, and it did look pretty good.
And I don't know if you've seen Tarot, but they used a lot of CGI.
Yeah.
And we can see how that turned out. It was not good. It was very, very bad.
Yeah, we talked about Tarot last time, and the idea to me is so cool. I love the idea, and I love the look of the monsters. But the story is so bad.
It's so overdone too.
Yeah,
Like,
you have the story where a new group has this unlocks this curse, and then they're just like, oh hey, this guy survived the last group that started this curse. Let's go talk to them, and they always die, and then it's the same thing over and over and over again.
And that one old woman that was literally just Mrs. Exposition. Like, she had no other purpose in that movie than to give exposition. Like, it's such a bad movie. And did they use practical effects in that?
I think at some points they did, but all the monsters were definitely CGI.
And, like, story was the biggest problem with that. Like, story was really bad in Tarot. And I think that just speaks to practical effects, because it's not always going to even look better. Like, it almost always will, but sometimes it won't. But I think it shows that whoever's making it has heart. Like, practical effects is like the life blood of a movie. It's just, it gives so much character to it. And if you're just going to skimp out and you're going to do CGI on everything, you're probably not going to write a great script either. You're not going to care about your movie.
I feel like CGI is just a lazy cut through.
Absolutely.
And then like one of my favorite practical effects person who makes them is Tom Savini, and he's made, I think he worked on The Thing, but he also did like the original Creepshow movie, and he did the puppet for Fluffy, which is the monster in the crate, and it's some of the best, because he's also worked on a lot of the Friday the 13th movies, which those have some pretty good practical effects in it. And I think he's one of the best practical effects maker.
Oh wow, what's that one movie called? There's one movie I watched where the CGI was just absolutely terrible. It had like,
There's so many.
but like this one, like the birds, it was like vultures or something. It was some type of bird. I don't remember what it was, and they were flying around like trying to attack the main characters, and you could tell that it was just some terrible, absolutely god awful CGI put in there, and like it was so bad. I don't remember what the movie was called. It was like a 2007 movie, but it was so bad.
You know, CGI has one saving grace, and that was Moonfall.
Okay.
Moonfall.
Oh my god.
In case you don't know, You probably didn't watch it in theaters because it was terrible. But it's a so bad it's a good film. I love Moonfall.
I don't think it's. I mean, because we went and saw it in theaters together.
Yeah,
It was so.
It was so
It was
funny.
so bad.
It was so funny.
I didn't even find it funny. I just was just like, what are we doing here?
For me, it's like every time they got to the end of the script, they realized it wasn't long enough, and then they said and then after the fourth and then, the moon is a home for aliens, but
Yeah.
they're not really aliens. They're human created robots that came back to Earth.
I remember at one point that they were just running on the Earth without or not on the Earth, on the moon without spaceships, or not spaceships, without spacesuits, but it's been so long since I've seen the movie.
It was terrible. It was really,
Sounds
really,
so
really bad in the
stupid.
best way.
So bad.
I love
So
it.
glad I never
I'd
went to
fight
watch
for
that.
Moonfall.
I feel like that's a losing battle. So, what would you say your third favorite horror movie
Such
is?
a hard choice. It's a toss between American Psycho and Ash vs. Evil Dead, but I think I'm gonna have to go with American Psycho. It's just such a good movie that blends the idea of like the surrealism of him finding out everything's fake and just seeing him like fall into insanity. It is very reminiscent of The House That Jack Built, or probably the other way around because American Psycho came out first, but I watched The House That Jack Built first. But it just feels very similar, seeing someone fall into that kind of insanity.
Yeah, I love how calm he is through the entire film. And even when he's having an emotional breakdown, he just keeps that straight, plain face.
I loved American Psycho so much, and I do love the fact that if you think about it, he's a regular guy. He's not superhuman. He's not a zombie. You know, he can die, obviously. You know, and it makes you think that that could actually if you run into someone, that could actually happen to you. So you have to think about that stuff. All that stuff could become reality if someone in not the right mindset watched the movie. They could get that idea and do that same exact thing.
And then another thing that I love about the film is how it starts off, kind of normal, how, well, I wouldn't say normal because he's killing people, but it's more how life would actually work, except there are a few parts where it's just kind of weird because at the very beginning he curses out a bartender and she just doesn't react. So that's either he said it in his head or the bartender hears it every day, so she just doesn't react to it. But then by the end of the film, he's shooting cops with a pistol and somehow blows up their cars. And by the end, it's just off the rails, and you can tell that it's his imagination.
And you find out that everything was in his imagination, but it's kind of like one of those things where you don't know if it really was all in his imagination.
Yeah.
You never really know how in his imagination it was. Did he have the interactions with those people? Was he actually a psychopath to those people, or was he always very nice and kind?
And then another thing is the detective who kept interviewing him about Paul Allen, because at the end they say that he was actually on a trip but the agent was looking for Paul Allen because he did go missing. So that's another question is did he actually go missing, or was Patrick just imagining all those scenarios with this random FBI agent?
Yeah. It's not many movies can do the it was all in his head thing very well. I would say American Psycho is probably the only one I've seen that does it very well.
Yeah.
There's probably more that I just haven't seen yet, but I've seen some terrible ones where it's all in his head. It makes no sense at all, and it makes me so mad.
And then I want to read the book that it's based on, because because books always, do so much better. I just recently finished reading The Silence of the Lambs, and the movie is one of my absolute favorite horror movies. But the book was so much better than the movie.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I loved Silence of the Lambs.
And then there was a few bits that were like cut out, like or that weren't in the book. Like when he's screaming down the well, like put the lotion in the basket. That never happens in the book.
Oh,
And
that's
it's-
just such an
it's-
integral part of Silence
Yeah,
of the
it's
Lambs.
such a it's probably the most referenced thing from Silence of the Lambs, but it never happened in the books. And like another thing that's so popular is like Hannibal Lecter saying hello Clarice, when nor in the book or the movie he never says hello Clarice.
Huh, that's fascinating.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, Mandela effect.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it's wild to think. And like another like popular thing was like at the end of the movie when Hannibal Lecter was just like, I'm gonna go have a old friend for dinner, when he's talking about the warden of the psych ward he was in, but never happened in the book. And it's really it's wild to see what things weren't in the book but were added in the movie.
I still can't believe that he never said hello, Clarice.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
once. In
Not
the movie.
once. Not once in the movie or book.
It's like the Darth Vader thing. It's like he never in the movie says, "Luke, I am your father." Nowhere in any of the movies is that said. He says,
Doesn't he say I am your father?
he
or
does
something?
say, "I am your father," but he never says, "Luke, I am your father."
I always remember the Luke, I am your father.
Exactly. It's crazy, and it's been said so many times.
Mhm.
Everybody thinks that's what's said, but it was something like, I'm gonna misreference this. It's like, I am Anakin Skywalker. I am your father, or something along those lines during their big fight inside of the Death Star. It's one of those things where it's just so crazy to think about what we don't notice or we wrongly notice in movies.
Mm-hmm.
And like I love those, like I love horror movies that mess with your head.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, making you question stuff.
Yeah,
and-
like making you question like, wait, hang on a minute. And then you have to go back and rewatch to make sure what you saw was actually what happened.
Yeah.
Cuz like one of those movies is like Longlegs.
Mhm.
We've talked about it on here before. But like I was watching it and it messes with your head. And at the end of the movie, the credits were going up instead of down. And like
didn't
I
know.
was sitting there for like a minute going like, wait, hang on. And I was like, I had to pull up another movie's credits to make sure I wasn't losing my mind.
I never noticed they were going up.
Yeah, it was going the opposite direction that credits usually go.
That's interesting.
That reminds me of like going back to the house that Jack built. I love that movie so much. The Verge. So this guy that Jack meets at the end of the movie, right? So he is like sort of the angel of death, or like of the dead. He doesn't cause death, but he's there when people die and he leads them to the afterlife. I don't know what the Christian word for that. I think there's some word for it. But you see him throughout the movie. He's hidden behind stuff, or he's just off in the distance. He'll just be sitting there, and you just never notice him. And then if you go back and you look at it, he's just going to be there. And movies that mess with your head, I gotta, like, the house that Jack built.
Yeah.
That one scene where he is with a family. He was like, he
His
says, "I have
family?
finally found my family," and it wasn't his family, but I
thought it was.
It never directly says it's his family, but I think he was dating or married to the woman, but they weren't his kids. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, they were going hunting, and he was teaching one of the kids how to shoot. They weren't actually hunting any game, more just learning how to shoot. And Jack actually says, mind you, the murderer says, "I don't like hunting. It's such a violent art. It's just so disrespectful to wildlife," or something of that notion. And then he's trying to teach the boy how to shoot, and in the process of it, they weren't walking in the right line, or they weren't obeying some kind of like hunter guidelines. So he just starts taking shots at them. He just starts shooting them all. And going through it, he's going through how you should hunt. So generally when you're hunting, you should kill the smallest child first, or the smallest fawn first, right?
Zach, what are you hunting? That you have to kill the smallest child first.
You're supposed to kill the smallest fawn first, because if the mother dies, if you were to shoot the mother first, then the other children couldn't survive. So if there's 3 deer, you have to shoot the smallest one first, because then the other 2 can survive. If you shoot the medium one first, then the other one, the smallest one might not survive. And if you shoot the biggest one first, they're probably both going to die. So he starts by killing the smallest child. He shoots him from some post, like a few hundred feet away. And then after that, he works his way up to the mother. And then eventually they have a picnic together. And the mother's scarred because she just watched her 2 children die. And then they have dinner before he kills her. It's terrible. It's a crazy sequence.
And like all of the sequences are so different that it feels like you're watching a different movie.
Yeah, because it's like it's just showing his underlying mental condition throughout the entire thing. I think you definitely see how much of a psychopath he is. You see how little emotion he feels, and you see it in different contexts, like you would in real life. Because like we all kind of change and adapt to the certain environment we're put in. Like I think we talk differently to different people, and you see how there's the underlying thing in his personality throughout all of his life, all those different situations. And you also see him grow in a bad way. He becomes a better murderer, but you see him grow.
I need to watch that movie. I need
Yeah,
to figure out what
You
it's
do need
on.
to watch that movie.
I would definitely recommend it.
Do you know, is it on anything?
I have no clue, but I bet it's somewhere.
I think it's on Netflix.
I'll have to check.
Not sure.
Yeah, I'll have to check and watch it after hearing all this
Yeah,
news about it.
it's definitely one I'd recommend.
I have so many horror movies that I have on my watch list and that I want to watch, but at the same time it's like I need the time to, cuz like one of them is, I've heard so many people talk about like The Thing, and I've never watched it.
You've never seen the original Thing?
No, mainly for the like, wasn't like the director of it a pedophile?
No, I don't
Oh no,
think so.
no, that's Jeepers Creepers. I was thinking.
Yeah, that's
right.
Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah, that I haven't seen The Thing, and I haven't seen Jeepers Creepers. Like I've had The Thing on my watch list for so long, and I need to sit down and watch it. But Jeepers Creepers, I'm not watching anytime soon because of that reason.
I have a confession to make. I haven't watched The Thing either.
Really?
No, I know about it because I've watched like short documentary stuff over it, but I haven't actually watched it.
It's like one of the most popular horror films.
Yeah.
And like I like the movie, but I think it's a little overrated. I mean, it's still a really good story. There's really good practical effects, and like it's just a wild movie at some parts. But the same person who directed it, he also directed Halloween, and I can't remember what else he's done. But he's done some popular horror films.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love John Carpenter is who the director is.
Yeah.
And I love his movies.
Yeah. Right now, I'm still trying to get through The Crow. I haven't had the time to watch it.
You know, I've been stuck on, not horror movie related at all, but I've been stuck on The Flash. They lost me around season 7. Too many seasons, and they're all bad. You see it. You see the writing get progressively worse as the show goes on.
I recently watched just an episode, and I thought the acting wasn't great.
The first 2 seasons are good, in my opinion. I love the first 2 seasons.
I think I was watching an episode from season 4.
Yeah, don't watch. Season 4 is like one of the worst ones.
But like the acting was bad. The CGI was worse.
Yeah, I don't know how you get worse after like 5 years. It doesn't make sense to me.
I've seen terrible CGI in that.
Well, I think that's it for this episode.
I think so.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciated it.
Yeah.
Well,
You've been watching Terror Talks.
We'll see you next time.